What's up? Welcome back to Kill Factory Moto. Thanks a bunch if you've been sticking with me for this long on my FZ-750 bike restoration. As you can see, I'm shooting from a bit of a makeshift studio that I've got going, and I'm very happy about it. Also, I might look a little different than in a lot of the videos. So I'm about to explain why, and I'm about to update you and show you what's going on with the bike. So if you've been watching all my videos up until now, I appreciate it and thank you for watching. There's a lot more coming, I assure you. And if you haven't, please hit that like button, subscribe button, leave a comment below so the YouTube algorithm helps me out. But what's been going on is that you've been watching videos of me about a year ago. That's when I began this restoration of the FZ-750. And the reason that it was so long ago and I'm just now posting these videos is because I had a pretty horrible spine accident which caused me not to walk for the better part of the year. In fact, all the videos that you have watched up until now, I was in massive pain and really forcing it and faking it in order to kind of distract my mind from the pain and make some content and make some videos. And I was shooting with my iPhone and just trying to build a bike or do whatever I could to get rid of the pain. And then when I stopped recording the videos is when the pain got so bad that I couldn't even be bothered to turn on my iPhone. So I did end up doing a lot more work to the bike than what's on video and than what you have seen. It's not substantial. I mean, it's a lot, but the bike isn't in perfect condition. What had happened was I would go into my garage and I would just work on the bike and do things to keep my mind away from what I was going through. And then it got to the point to where I was bedridden and I couldn't walk anymore. The spine accident was caused from a car accident that I was in. I wasn't on a motorcycle, so don't worry about that. I was actually in a car, and it caused this spine accident, which not only actually prompted me to start making these videos, which is a good thing, but really kind of took a good 2 years out of my life. Good news is I've had spinal surgery. I've had a year of recovery, a year and some change in recovery. I'm exercising, I'm in good health, and I'm ready to work on the bikes again. So that's why I bring you to today, to this moment. Right now is I'm gonna go ahead and take you out and show you how the bike runs, what it looks like. It still looks like crap, but what it looks like right now. And I'm gonna explain what I fixed on it from the last videos if you've seen it. Let's go ahead and look at this right now. I actually have this on hand. This is actually the very last video I shot of the motorcycle before I got to a place where I couldn't walk anymore. I'm going to kind of go through it here. Kind of just some basic footage of me trying to get the bike started. It was already running. I'd got it started a few times, but I was having trouble with keeping it idling at that moment, and I was basically having to really give it a lot of throttle in order to keep the bike in a good place and running. This is the last footage I had of when I first got it running, which was such amazing success, in my opinion, considering I'm a novice mechanic and I've never worked on something to this extent in my entire life. I figured it out on my own. I looked up the climber manual, because this motorcycle itself is rare enough to where it's really hard to find a lot of good stuff online for this specific motorcycle. And then I looked at a lot of videos of other people working on bikes to kind of get the idea of how that would translate to this particular motorcycle. And there's me right there riding the bike up and down the street. I think it stalls out once there. I had my girlfriend caption this video from our rooftop actually. But that's the bike you've seen in my videos, running and working. And I also have an Instagram post up on here too as well, which is all pretty epic in my opinion, since I've never worked on anything in my life. But yeah, now we're here. It's February 2020, ready to start working on the bike again and getting it really truly restored. I'd like to make it a beautiful bike, and I'd like to actually start working on my second bike as well. I'd like to make one a cafe racer and one the original standard street bike that it was in the 80s. So without further ado, let's go take a look at the bike. Let's go talk about what I've done to it, and let's start moving forward. there it is. That was me riding the bike. It runs, it idles, and I actually use it as my daily driver now, which is pretty nice considering it was an old garbage bike that didn't run and was left out in the weather for 3+ years. I think I did a pretty good job for a novice. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to take you around the bike and kind of point out and explain the things that I did off camera over the course of the year where I was in a lot of spinal pain and not really able to handle doing any videoing or anything like that. I'll kind of run you through and show you what I did, and hopefully in the future we can make this bike even better together. All right, let's go. All right, let's start off with the front of the bike here. As you can see, I have a different headlight on. I bought this cafe racer style headlight for about 80 bucks on Amazon. I really like the style, and like I've said before, the 88, I would like it to eventually be more of a cafe racer style bike, whereas this beat up looking 86 is going to be stock. So yeah, I replaced the headlight, and in order to do that, I had to take off this entire front piece that includes the gauges as well as this giant headlight. And because of these gauges and this giant headlight, there's a whole lot of switches and wiring and just a massive amount of stuff going on there. And all these bikes in the 80s, they like overdid the electrics, like the kickstand switch for the automatic shut off, and like fuel pump, and just everything about these bikes just has too much electrics. But in order to put this light on, I had to get rid of all that stuff, and then I still had a lot of these switches to deal with and a lot of this wiring. So since I didn't quite have a place to put it just yet, I just kind of taped it up and mounted stuff around there and just kind of tightened it up, and that's where it's going to remain for now. I also hooked up the blinkers. The tail and the front blinkers work. Unfortunately, I wired them backwards. Those are daytime running blinker lights. They're supposed to be on the back end of the bike. I've got to switch that around. Good thing about this is that driving around at nighttime, since this is my daily driver, kind of adds more light to the front end and lets people know that I'm right there. But I do need to fix that. Man, I'm getting texted like crazy. Also, took apart all the switches. I got the blinker switch there. I've got the starter switch there. Took off the handlebars, took off the switches, took them apart, used cleaner. I think I was using like carb cleaner, brake cleaner, maybe even vinegar, and was carefully getting rust off of the contacts and cleaning everything up and putting them back together exactly as they were. Took quite a bit of time, but pleased to announce that all the switches work properly. The horn works. I believe it still works. Let's test it. Oh, maybe not. I think it only actually works when the bike is started. But yeah, just take my word for it, the switches work. Also, took apart the master cylinder here for the clutch. I took this whole thing apart. It was dried out and crusted, and I followed the lines all the way through. I ran new brake fluid through the master cylinder, which led me down here. And then I had to take that entire thing apart. I took the entire clutch apart and everything, all the, forgive my lack of knowledge of terminology, but the gearbox, ended up having to take that all apart. Inside of the gearbox, they were all kind of dried and stuck together, so I had to pull them apart. You have to be very careful when you're taking apart the gearbox, because there's a specific order and set that they're in, so I had to take every little plate off very carefully, put it back in the same order, and I had to kind of oil up and grease it up and free them because they were all kind of stuck. Because of that, I had to fix the clutch as well, because the clutch actually wasn't pulling out of gear when I pulled the clutch. So I basically had to go through here and pull out the rod, clean some stuff out, finagle it a bit. It took many hours to get the pressure and that rod and everything out and back in. And I think I did it quite a few times before it actually began to, before the clutch started pulling the bike out of gear as it should. Moving on, the chain was all rusted. So I basically just kept it in vinegar for like a few days, cleaned it up with a wire brush, got that thing back on. There's these big electrical boxes. I switched out a couple of the switches from the 88 FZ-750 because I couldn't figure out which switch exactly wasn't, or could maybe be one of the biggest problems. So I just went ahead and switched them out. After I did that, you know, I was at a point to where the bike was just firing up pretty easily. Let's see what else we got. The seat obviously looks terrible still. I took off the old gas tank. It was a blue gas tank with some dents and quite a bit of damage to it. So I pulled that off and I put on the 88 or 86 FZ-750 tank just because it looked better. Put on a new gas cap, and also inside this I cleaned out the insides with the fuel gauge sensor in there. I de-rusted everything using a lot of vinegar, a lot of cleaning fluids. It took a very long time to get the inside completely void of rust, and also then I sealed it. I got some tank sealers, some really good stuff, and completely sealed the inside of the tank. It was a bit difficult because the second you get all the rust out of a tank, the minute oxygen hits it, it wants to flash rust again. So with this tank sealer, they provide some stuff that enables you to kind of have a little bit of more time before the flash rusts begin. So you can get all the water out of the tank, dry it out, and then do a quick clean, dry it out again, and then put the sealer in. So now the gas that's going through into the engine is like pure and delicious. Let's see what else we got. The fuel pump here, completely disassembled the fuel pump. It was corroded, stuck together, not moving. It was in really, really bad shape. And I just kind of figured it out. Luckily, the seals inside the fuel pump itself were still good. It was a big surprise. But I degunked it, probably took that thing apart like 2 or 3 times before I really figured out what to do. And it works beautifully now. Got that little fuel filter on there too. Oh, the brakes. Well, same with the clutch master cylinder. I had to do the same exact thing with the brake master cylinder over here. Had to completely take it apart. It was gunked up. Seals seemed to still be good. And I had to put brand new brake fluid in there after everything was cleaned out. There we go. Runs over to that cylinder. Where's it at? I don't know if you can see it, but there's that cylinder there. Which leads me down to the calipers. Both calipers in the front and the back of the bike I had to completely dismantle, which was extremely difficult. They were like fused together. It had been so long since this thing had brake fluid or was even used that it was completely fused together. Since I was a novice at knowing anything about brake calipers, I thought it was supposed to be that way. So I was trying to fit in the brake pads and trying to see how it worked. I think before that I was just trying to figure out how to get these things off. I had no idea that it was just so fused together that it was supposed to split in half and all that stuff. So once I took them apart, the pistons inside, they were also like fused into the caliper. And so I had to kind of do a lot of finagling and use of different types of fluids in order to get that cylinder to pop out. I think I spent like 2 days working on these calipers and trying to get those cylinders from being fused from the inside of the caliper. Once I did that, changed the brake pads, got them back on, got the brake fluid running through, and was amazed that I was able to change brakes on a motorcycle, having never done that before. Moving on. The starter. Everything was going well with the starter for most of the time getting this bike running, and then right at the 11th hour, and that was around the same time that I moved all these switches from the other bike to this bike, the starter just stopped working. I pulled it out, I hooked it up to the battery charger, and that's how I was able to find out it just kind of died. So luckily I had the parts bike, or the, if you want to call it, the next restore project. I was able to pull the starter out of that, luckily, and switch it over to this. And after I did that, I think that was possibly the day that I rode the bike for the first time, which was pretty exciting. Aside from that, I basically had almost everything off and out of this section of the bike. you know, including the starter. I taken off the shifter, completely cleaned everything out, made sure that it functioned properly and moved smoothly. Funny thing is, the guy that previously owned this bike, he just spray painted the entire engine and bike and just every piece of it he could in order to, I guess, kind of make it look nice. And so that's why you've got like this nasty stuff here, and the engine kind of looks like that. So I cleaned off as much of it as I could while I was getting in there. But there's still a long way to go with that. If this bike ever gets taken apart and the engine gets worked on, well, that's when I'm gonna really kind of go for it and make it look really nice. Mufflers and radiator were taken off. New coolant put in, obviously. Oh, yes. I have to tell you about the worst experience I had with this bike. And it's actually pretty important if any of you out there have an FZ-750. It's information I wish that I had, and I had to learn the hard way. And it has to do with the carburetors. Let me show you that. Actually, since I don't want to take apart my running bike right now to show you the deal with the carburetors, I'm just going to show you on my non-running parts bike, the 1988 FZ-750. They have the same carburetors. So basically when the bike wasn't idling and I couldn't get it to run properly, I looked all over the internet trying to figure out what the deal is with the carburetors. I'd read in some places that there's one of the jets inside of the carburetors, that each one of them has to be turned to a specific tightness. And so for, gosh, probably weeks, I was taking the carburetors off, which takes a bit of time. You know, it's not easy to do. I would take them completely off, dismantle them, put them on my workbench, open up each pot, I believe that's what they're called down here, go through, untighten one of the jets, and then retighten it a very specific amount of turns. And I put it back on the bike, and yeah, it would run good for a minute, maybe, 20 minutes. What I didn't realize what was happening is those jets that I was adjusting on the inside of the carburetors, since they weren't getting tightened as much as they should have been, they were slowly unscrewing and falling out, and then the bike would not run, and I couldn't figure out why. And it's because there's really not a lot of good information out there about the FZ-750s. There just really isn't good information. And this is really, really stupid what I'm about to tell you. But after weeks of pulling these things off, putting them on the bench, putting them back on, trying to start the bike, I did that probably 50 times because apparently I needed to get the mixture proper, the air to gasoline mixture, and I just could not figure out how to do it. Nowhere on the internet, nowhere in anything that I read said that there's an external screw that you can loosen and tighten to get the right mixture in. I promise you, I looked everywhere. I even read articles about this bike that said it does not have an external screw on the carburetors to tell you, to allow you to change the mixture. So after I was fiddling with those for so long, I put my arm under the bike when it was running, and I felt this guy. I don't know if you can see it. Let me get my cell phone to light it up. Hold on. There we go. It's a large, easy to find screw. It's got a spring on it. It's pretty visible and obvious. And that's your mixture screw for the carburetors. I spent so much time dismantling these things, in and out and in and out, to find that screw. And it was the most frustrating yet joyous occasion when I found it, because then I realized, oh my God, I could pull these carburetors apart, put those jets in the way that they're supposed to be, nice and snug, come back, fiddle with that screw, and then the bike will run well. Sure enough, it did. And that was all I needed to do the whole time. So if you're watching this video and you have an FZ-750 and you're having trouble with it idling, well, that's your answer. That was one of the biggest struggles I had with this motorcycle. And I think that kind of brings us up to date. If there's anything I can remember in the future, I might let you know about it. There was one more thing I did during that process that was off camera, was I took the blue gas tank from this bike here, from the running bike, and I completely stripped it. My intent was to kind of strip it, seal it on the inside, repaint it, do some body work, and get it looking real nice to get it back on this bike. But you know, life happens, things happen, and as I stripped it and I got all the rust out of the inside, life kind of kicked my butt a little bit, and I ended up having to stop that part of the project, and it completely rusted over again. So that will be one for another time. We will repair that tank, get it sealed, maybe get it back on this bike, work on that seat potentially, but there is still a whole lot more I gotta do. We'll figure it out. I do really want to get started on this 86 because it's got the plastics and everything. This bike has the potential to be completely stock and amazing, and like I said, there just aren't that many of them out there anymore that are running in good shape and that have idiots like me that are willing to take care of them and restore them. But yeah, I think that takes us up to speed. That's my daily driver right there, my 1988 FZ-750, my Yamaha FZ-750. And that is it. Thanks again for tuning in to Kill Factory Moto. I'll be here every week as much as I can, working on this bike, working on other bikes, talking about motorcycles and badassery of all sorts. Please don't forget to like, share, subscribe, leave a comment down below. It all helps YouTube algorithm, which will help me make better content and stuff like that. Also, if you're really interested, I do have some pretty cool designs, like street art inspired and war and Kill Factory inspired designs up on killfactory.com. Just some cool t-shirts. Buy those, help support. Let's do some cool shit. Thanks a bunch. Cheers.